There was a question even before you jumped on. I'd say about 10 minutes before you jumped on. There's somebody new to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And they were asking, and I think it's a good question to ask you. It's and they're new. He says, I'm a newbie, but most welcome. What is Shabbat?
It's a Hebrew word that means Sabbath. We say Sabbath, but the Hebrew word is Shabbat. So we say Shabbat Shalom. Shalom is peace. It's like the peace that passes all understanding. It's like super peace. So when you hear somebody say Shabbat Shalom, we're basically saying peace on the Sabbath.
And well, they're hearing us talk about Sabbath, and they're just coming in, and they said, they admitted, I'm a newbie. What is Shabbat? And it's a commandment, the fourth commandment, where it's the only one, as Rob has said hundreds of times, if not many times, remember, and he's repeated it over. I mean, it's the fourth commandment. It's the only one he says remember. Mm-hmm. And I can't explain it, but once you start observing it, there is a peace, mm-hmm. especially as a man who was angry before. I was just very angry prior to coming into this. But there's a shalom, a peace beyond any measure I can explain, mm-hmm. in my walk. And it's because of obedience. I just know it is. And I can tell when I'm falling backwards or stumbling, things are not going right, and I mess up. Everything's out of whack. Nothing, my paths are not straight. And it started out obeying the Sabbath, the fourth commandment. So,
agreed.
I don't know. There's a few questions in the chat, and I know.
Let's jump on them.
We got little time. That was the first one. Let's see here. Samuel asks, he says also, okay, right off the bat for Rob, in Deuteronomy 32, I noticed a striking similarity to the end of Job, where Yahweh spoke directly to Job in regards to just how fed up Yahweh was with Job, and the similarity being shown in Deuteronomy 32. I was just curious if you noticed any parallel between the lesson learned in Job and a lesson set up by Yahweh to Israel through the songs of Moses.
Never thought about that. It's an interesting question. That's next week's Torah portion. So maybe we'll have to, I don't have Deuteronomy 32 off the top of my head memorized. Although I will say Deuteronomy 32:10 means a lot to me. That's the scripture that locked me in Texas. When I came down to Texas, I was broke, homeless, divorced, bankrupt, and living in a Dodge Stratus with everything I owned in it, ready to put a bullet in my head. At the end of 2002, we were going through a rough time. And every time I tried to leave the Metroplex, I was headed for LA, man. I figured if I'm already living in the van down by the river, living in a Dodge, I figured, I'll just, I'll be the next true Hollywood story, Hollywood, E Entertainment or whatever. Every time I tried to leave, it was like I hit a force field, man. It was this ugly, nasty feeling, like I just couldn't leave the Metroplex. And I thought, oh God, I know you're trying to tell me something here. And it feels like you're trying to tell me to stay here in Texas. And I'm looking around, there's hardly even trees here. I grew up in the Berkshires, Massachusetts, rolling mountains and forests. And, I'm like, this place is a desert. I'm like, I don't want to be here. And I was crying out to God. I thought, I need to find a place just to be alone with him besides my car. So I went to a convenience store and bought a map just to look for some place that I could be alone with God and, not other than my car. And I found a big reservoir, Lake Louisville. And so I thought that looked cool. So I followed the map, went to Lake Louisville, and I'm sitting at a picnic table bench just crying out like, God, please, what am I doing here? And my Bible's on the table and it blows open to Deuteronomy chapter 32. And my eyes literally went to verse 10. That's the first thing my eyes saw when I looked down. And it says, and he found him in a desert wasteland, in a howling wilderness. He led them out. He instructed them, and he kept them as the apple of his eye. And in the New Living Translation, which was the parallel Bible that I have with my King James Bible, it basically said he found them in a howling desert, and he cared for them as his most prized possession. So Deuteronomy 32 has some personal significance to me because of that. But to his question, I've never given that any thought. So, when we go through Deuteronomy 32 in more depth, let's see if we can remember that for next week's study.
In the scriptures that I have, it says he found him in the wilderness and in a wasted, howling desert. He encompassed him and made him understand. He watched over him as an apple of his eye. Wow.
Yeah.
Made him understand.
That was the word that he showed me that said, I got you covered. Stay here in Texas. And now I could see why. January of 2003, no. I was like, I don't want to be here.
One of the most profound things you said that's affected me in your ministry is that Yahweh forgives us for his sake. Mm. And when I forgive someone else, it's not for that person, it's for me.
That's right.
So that I can live in peace. And I never understood that. And the more I walk with him, the more I hear when somebody's speaking truth or speaking from the word, and it makes me understand. I don't know, I can't explain it how it works. He flips a light switch on and he makes you understand. Right. And then you can put that into practice. But I just wanted to share that.
Yeah.
That's very, very cool. Okay. Don't want to take anything away from the folks. Let's see. Heather asked, Rob, is it disobeying Torah to do light housework such as dishes on Shabbat?
That question comes up a lot from, as people start to figure out what does it mean to keep Sabbath, people start wondering, can I do this? Can I do that? And let me just say, what I'm about to say is not an answer to that question. It's my understanding of where I am with this issue. Because I start wondering about various things too. Can I do this? Can I do that? What can I do? What can I do? And Sabbath is to be remembered. The reason we remember it is because it calls back to the creation week. The creation week is when God took his rest from what? His creative labors. In other words, he was laboring to create things, and he said, my work, which at that time was the creative labors, is done. I'm going to rest. So for me, what constitutes creative labor? Well, it's what I do from Sunday through Friday. It's researching, it's writing books, it's editing video, it's producing products, it's all the things that I do to make a living, to feed my family, to keep the roof over my head. That which I do to sustain myself and my family is my work. I stopped doing that. So because other people ask, well, can I work out? Can I go to the gym? Can I jog? Can I go bike riding? And again, I could be wrong. So don't base your answer on my answer. I don't believe that is work. And in fact, for me, when I work out, and I haven't been working out on Shabbat simply because I spend the entire day with friends reading the Bible. So, but if I wasn't doing that, I personally don't see anything wrong with taking care of my temple, going for a walk, going for a bike ride, enjoying nature, getting the blood pumping, and being healthy. I personally don't see anything wrong with that. That doesn't mean that I'm right. So, regarding laundry and stuff like that, if that's what you do during the week and, doing laundry or doing dishes and things like that, if those are the things that you do all week long, I would say stop. Give yourself a break. Chill out. Rest. Relax. If it's not what you do all week long and, laundry needs to be done or dishes need to be washed or whatever, I personally don't see anything wrong with it because I don't see that fitting the precedence of the creation week. Again, I could be wrong. You need to pray about it. You need to ask the Holy Spirit what you should do. You may pray and the Holy Spirit may say, you know what? I don't want you to do anything, but here's the danger that I think the Pharisees got into. And it may have started out with a righteous zeal. If you realize in the New Testament, we got Pharisees and Sadducees everywhere, but they're nowhere in the Old Testament. We never see Pharisees and Sadducees in the Old Testament. Something happened. Well, the something that happened was the Jews went into exile in Babylon for 70 years for not obeying God. So I think while they were there going through the punishment and realizing, this really stinks, I want to get back to the way it used to be. Well, sorry, the only way you're going to get back to the way it used to be is to obey God. Well, how do we obey God? We better figure that out so we can get the heck out of here, so we can get out of Babylon. So I think what happened was in their zeal and desire to get back to doing the right thing, they started setting up what they call fences around the Torah. They started making sure, I don't want to violate that again. So, we better, but what happened was they built so many of these things that basically you had to lie in bed and breathe shallow. And that's about all you could do on Sabbath. And yet Yeshua was doing all kinds of stuff and the Pharisees were rebuking him for it. Well, some, in what I call pagan Christianity, actually believe that Yeshua is Lord of the Sabbath, so he could do whatever he wanted on the Sabbath. And so he was violating the Sabbath. There are Christians who actually teach this. And I'm going, okay, sin is defined by the Bible as transgression of the law. If Yeshua was violating the Sabbath, then he was a sinner. And if Yeshua is a sinner, then we don't have a sinless lamb, and your faith in him is totally in vain, completely in vain. But what if he said Sabbath was, it was made for us. It's designed for us, So just look at his example. I mean, look at the thing. He was healing people on Sabbath. He was doing things. So I don't think we have to lay in bed and breathe shallow on Sabbath. I think we're allowed to do other things. There's other things people start will look and they'll say, well, you can't kindle a fire. Well, then you start thinking, well, shoot, that light that's a fire in that light over there, the inside of a light bulb. And if I turn the key of the ignition of my car, that starts a fire in my car. So, I guess I got to keep all the lights off in my house and I can't drive anywhere. No, I don't think that's what that's saying at all. If you think about what it took to, first of all, start a fire back then and kindle a fire, I mean, you have to go out and chop down trees and wood and do manual labor to kindle a fire. There's no manual labor involved in turning a light switch on or turning the ignition of your car or taking a pile of clothes and throwing it in a machine and hitting a button, or, rinsing off some dishes and putting it in a machine and hitting a button that cleans them. So, again, I could be 100% wrong in all this. This is just my understanding as a 7-year-old in Torah.
Somebody in chat said they met a Jewish individual who doesn't even turn on the lights in the house. Is that part of the Talmudic line of thinking?
It's exactly what I was just describing.
Right.
Is people start getting into that mentality, and it may be well-meaning. They may be, their desire is to really obey God, and their personal conviction is that turning that light switch on is starting a fire, so they're not going to do it. I'm not there. I don't have that, because what happens when you continue to go down that path is all of a sudden Sabbath becomes a dread. It becomes a burden. It becomes something you don't look forward to because, well, crap, all I can do is lay in bed and breathe shallow. I mean, where's the shalom in that? Where's the peace and joy? And, there's none of that. So, but again, pray.
Yeah. There was a question that was posed to Steve along those lines. Somebody new coming into Torah, somebody who's wanting to observe the Father's rest day of Sabbath, but they're stuck in a secular job that has them working some weekends not. And the weekends that they go into work, they're dreading it because they want to observe Sabbath, but again, they can't pay their bills because they'll get fired from not going in. So for those individuals, what would you say, or how would you advise them to move forward? Somebody who's new.
Yeah, for sure. Sheila and I are fortunate because we work for ourselves. So, we can make our own schedules however we want, but we realize we're kind of the exception. That most people have a 9-to-5 or whatever. They have a job that they go to, and their schedule can become problematic in situations like this. And we've had many people in our home fellowship that have had these problems. And in every case that I'm aware of so far, whenever those people went to the Father in prayer and said, Father, I really want to obey you. I really want to keep your Shabbat. But you have provided this job for me, and I need this job to feed my family. Can you make a way where there seems to be no way? And in every case that I know of that people have done that, God has made a way. Some crazy things have happened where schedules get, can you work on Sunday instead? Sure, I can, whatever. He's always made a way. When your heart and your sincere desire is to obey him and walk in his ways, he wants that, So I really believe that, whether it's your job becomes suddenly more accommodating to you or another job opens up for you, that you can leave the one you're at and go to one that has more flexibility. Something always seems to happen. And other people, some people I've heard this story before, but I had a guy in our home fellowship who is also self-employed, but he does the most business he does is on Friday evenings and Saturdays, all day on Saturday. And he's like, man, I mean, the majority of my income for my business comes in on those days, during that time period. And I said, brother, all I can tell you is what I've heard. I shared with him some of the testimonies and the blessings that I've seen. And I said, would it kill you to just give it a test? Just, I see your heart right now as you really want to, but I see your dilemma. Well, God knows this. He's the one that made it possible for you to have this business and the abilities and everything that you're doing in the first place. So if you just say, Father, I really want to honor you. I want to close my doors at sunset on Friday and keep them closed until sunset on Saturday. And I'm going to trust you. And so he did that. And he came back the following week after that. And he says, he testified to the whole group. He's like, you're not going to believe it. He says, my business, I don't know if it was triple or whatever, but it was a substantial increase in business from Tuesday to Thursday that more than compensated for what he would normally do on Friday evenings and Saturdays. And I mean, he was just out of his mind, crazy, like excited, And I said, well, brother, I can't promise that this will be the case every week, but you've seen that God is faithful. So, I would take those testimonies and to heart and start praying and see what happens.
Steve said something similar the other night. We're in Babylon, and we have to wait on Yahweh to work these things out for us. But in the meantime, do it with all your heart, do it with a circumcised heart, and wait on him, and he'll open that door. And long story short, in my work, I've told him I'll work every Christmas, every Easter, every Halloween, every holiday that you got, I will be on call and I will work. I'll go in at 7 on Saturday evenings if I have to, and work every Sunday. But I have one day that I need with my family and with my God, and it's a commandment, and it seems to be working out. So that's how I rectified that one. Yeah, so moving on.
Well, we have a really big God. Nothing is too hard for him. So, working out a job schedule is not a problem. Just look around at all of creation and see what he did with creation. I think he can handle rearranging your schedule for you, if you need it.
Oh, yeah. He's capable of parting seas. So, yeah.
Exactly.